Who was our last president? I can't remember his name. Huh? What? Clinton. A whoremonger. And then you have the panty waist from Georgia, the little peanut president. Carter. What was his name? What was his first name? Jimmy Carter. I remember him trotting in his little shorts with his little bandy legs in Korea with all the troops. That was our president. Jimmy Carter, the peanut farmer. And now look at the president we got today. He continually goes around with his... He's got this furrowed thing. He looks like he's scared to death. Please love me, please love me, please believe me. Or haven't you noticed? It's the most disgusting excuse of a man I've ever seen in my life. He makes his father look great. A phenomenon which point to cultural decline. That's the third thing. The fourth thing, or political degeneration. Hitler again, continuing. Whether it be a question of the defects in the school system, where today we have guns and drugs and fornication and no teaching and everybody has the IQ of a turnip. Or of the evil influence which the press exerts against the adult population. Or haven't you noticed? Always, I'm quoting literally from Hitler, always and everywhere, these phenomena, here's your payoff now. Now, do you have ears to hear? I don't know if you do. I don't think you do, probably, but I'm going to say it anyway. Always and everywhere, these phenomena are caused by a lack of consideration of the interests of the race to which one's own nation belongs, or in the failure to recognize the danger that comes when a country allows an alien race to exist within its national body. Now I'm going to challenge you all. You take any one of these 6 things I just mentioned, or that Hitler just mentioned, pick your own stuff. Pornography, crime, inflation, loss of credit, expatriation of capital, the decay of patriotism, the overall lack of manners and decency. I don't care what you pick. Always and everywhere these phenomena are caused by a failure to recognize or failure to consider the interests of the race to which one's own nation belonged. I'm putting that in the past tense now. Or in the failure to recognize the danger that comes from allowing a foreign or alien race to exist within the national body. What alien race? Do you think I worry about the North American Indian? Not a chance. They can be our friends. They are our burden, that we can make life good for them, and they'll be willing to do it. The Negroes of Africa? Come on, don't make me laugh. That's not the race that's hurt us. They are stage managed by the race that does, though. All the speeches of Martin Luther King were written by the Jews who created the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Well-known fact to those who are curious. Do you think it is caused by the Asians? They keep to themselves. No, no, no. No. It's the Jewish danger. How many of you have read the Communist Manifesto? Mike? Okay. Anybody else? Pete? Yeah. Well, you know what they say at the beginning of that? Marx, the Jew, by the way, he was financed by the Society of Elders, who were financed by Rothschild. That's where he and that rat, his buddy, got money. It wasn't just from his father's textile business. Karl Marx said, "We don't hide our policy or our aim. We boldly announce what we're all about. We call for the total abolition of property, the repeal of the home, the wipeout of marriage, the creation of a community of fornicating women." They come right out and say it. The repeal, the abolition of private property. And yet I meet college kids today who say to me, "Oh yeah, Karl Marx, yeah, I know about him, yeah." "What do you think about him?" "Oh, he was quite a philosopher, a great economist." And I said, "Is that right? Have you ever read the Communist Manifesto?" "Oh yeah, we studied that in school," which means you don't read it. Do you know that it calls for the abolition of property? Do you believe that? Do you believe in the wiping out of the home and of marriage and of parental raising of children, all of which are expressed in the Communist Manifesto? Do you believe in the graduated income tax? Do you realize that public schools is point number 10 in their takeover of a capitalist country? It's all there. Who created it? Who financed it? Who brought it into this country? Do you think it was our ancestors? Jesus Christ. You look at the Constitution of the United States of America, a capitation tax, which means a direct tax, like an income tax, was forbidden. Now we have it. How come? Paul Warburg is the answer to that. Paul Warburg, who was he? The big German banker, Jew, who came over and in concert with the Rothschilds took over the American banking system. They created the Federal Reserve System in 1913 on December the 23rd. And they have been in control of it ever since. It only took 20 years. That's all. After they got us into a war and created the booms and busts of the 1920s, the Great Depression 1929 that lasted all the way till World War II, which was still a depression, only worse because now 25 million people were in the war effort and people were on way worse off than they were during the Depression. Rationing, for God's sake. You couldn't even get butter. Everything you want to name here that you don't like is a proximate consequence of the Jewish danger. And Hitler said it. And Henry Ford in 1920, for your ears which are not edified, in 1920, Henry Ford wrote a great bestseller. It was called The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem. Every person that bought a Ford, and there was only one make and only one color available. It was black, and it was a Model T. It had been riding the skies ever since 1908. I'll tell you something. In 1920, Henry Ford said, along with his great buddies, Thomas Alva Edison and Mr. Firestone, that if we don't learn how to finance our own growth out of our profits and through private investors and stay away from Jewish-controlled Wall Street and the international bankers, the United States is doomed. Just as the European countries have been doomed. France is a degenerate country that will never recover. Same thing goes for Western Germany. Poland is finished. Europe has been communized. Henry Ford swept the nation with that. Every purchaser of Ford got 4 volumes. It's now abridged into 1. It's great stuff. He spent $8 million to have it researched by some of the greatest historical experts in the world. And in 1921, Louis Marshall, head of the Jewish Committee in New York, told him, "You better stop this." He wouldn't, and Henry Ford was driven off the road and almost killed. His wife begged him to back off, and he did. Guess what happened? The Jews confiscated all of his wealth by their own goddamn laws. Pardon the language, but I can't help it. It's appropriate. When they created the income tax, and out of the income tax, they got these huge charitable, and the inheritance tax, and they got huge foundations created out of that. When a man is worth as much as Ford, the only way he can keep his factories together is to bequeath it to foundations. That's not taxed. So why would the Jews do that? Answer. There are avenues of takeover at the public level beyond the reach of the original creator that they are masters of. And they have turned the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundations over to the furtherance of communist causes in America today. So I'm telling you here that you will never be able to lend a hand in helping truth to prevail until you wake up and access the tremendous emotion of hate. Now, coming back, after having explained all that, I bring you back now to Henrietta Chirac at the Eagle's Nest, remember? She stood up, tipsy with booze, a woman who couldn't handle it, which is, there's nothing more disgusting than a woman who speaks out of turn in public, and she's drunk and she can't handle her booze. I can't think of anything more disgusting to me. That's a man talking, but that's how I feel. It's disgusting. And nothing, it's not the most disgusting thing is her husband who doesn't put her in her place. Right now. Or else. Because you see, for over 100 years now, women in Europe and now in America have learned to unfear the man. And that is the beginning of the uglification of woman. I don't know whether that strikes your deep instincts or not. Probably not, because you're so far gone, probably, because of propaganda. And I'm not insulting you. I was there myself. I had to work my way out of this. But Henrietta says to Hitler, but der Fuhrer, do you know that I was just in Amsterdam and I just came back from there and I saw a truck carrying off some Jews to a concentration camp? Isn't this horrible? What are you going, do you know about this? And Goebbels, who was sitting next to Hitler, who was no slouch and knew more than Hitler did about what had to be done, and it's too bad he wasn't running the war, turned to Hitler and said, "What a silly cow." And Hitler said, "I'll have to take care of this." He was only drinking tea. Everybody else was drinking wine. Hitler got up, and as the gentleman he was, he went to Henrietta and took her outside of earshot. And he said to her, "Ma'am, do you know that at this very hour, 500,000 of the cream of the German youth are dying in Russia to save the fatherland from the predatory Bolsheviks from Russia? And do you know that those Jews who were being carted off in that truck to that concentration camp are assassins? Do you know that they have blown up bridges and murdered people? And do you not also remember that in 1933 the Jews universally declared war against Germany on an economic boycott basis, which led to the Nuremberg laws, of course, the race laws, segregate against these guys. They are our sworn enemy. Hitler responded accordingly. I totally applaud him for that. But in 1939, on September the 6th, remember, Germany invaded Poland, which Poland richly deserved. On September 1st, 1939, on September 3rd, the war was declared. And on September the 6th, look it up, Chaim Weizmann, who was a leading Jewish figure in international Jewry, declared, with all the Jewish support and all the major newspapers all over the world, International Jewish Declaration of Military War against Germany. So, what the hell? They're blowing up bridges, they're at war with Russia, they're within inside. Hitler says, hell, let's put them to work. Not to kill them, put them to work. Also gypsies, also homosexuals, also Jehovah's Witnesses, and also assorted criminals and scum. So Hitler tells her this. And she doesn't speak back because she's been nonplussed. And so Hitler very graciously said to her, and I hope you get this. It's beautiful. He said, Henrietta, the trouble with you is you have not learned how to hate. I claim I've learned how to hate. It comes pretty natural to me ever since I was a boy. Little smartasses that misbehaved on the playground and stole a baseball away from me, got the crap kicked out of them by me, personally. I got kicked out of Ellisburg Elementary School for fighting. I wouldn't take any crap from anybody. I'm still that way. And now it's against our traditional enemy. But that's a beautiful statement. The trouble with you is you haven't learned to hate. What's implied there? You don't have any motive power. You love everybody. You don't get upset. You never raise your voice. Why, hell, let's be tolerant now. There's no right or wrong. Everything's relative. Why, women are equal with men and men are equal with women. Balderdash. There's no equality here. You got to have huge love for freedom in this theory. And you must have huge hate for all those who are destroying our children, wiping out our culture, demoralizing us, and leading us into hell. Galambos says we're already in it. And I believe it. So, you remember, I'll give you one more thing. 4 requirements in order to grasp this great book, which consists of 12 volumes. Galambos said there are 4 requirements. He said it in V50. He said it always in his Concept 21 courses. And it was this. First, you must have curiosity. That separates the men from the boys right there. Most people have no curiosity at all, for Christ's sake. They're not interested. They're not curious about anything. Second, you had to have dissatisfaction with the status quo, which is a very euphemistic way of putting it. You probably did it for marketing reasons. That's on one side of the same coin. The other side of the coin is aspiration for higher things. So he's saying if you haven't got aspiration, meaning a striving and a questing after something that is beautiful out there that you're going for, that's better than the world you live in today, you'll never be able to make it. But that's only one side of that coin. I bet you nobody in this room has thought of that before. I bet you haven't. I bet you haven't. And if you have, I congratulate you, but I bet you haven't. Because aspiration all by itself is never going to do it. Never do it. Never do it. You can't sit around all the time contemplating the beautiful articulation of your goals and expect to ever amount to a damn thing. You got to have something that gets you off your ass and make you go. And that's the dissatisfaction with the status quo. Well, I like to use the simple Anglo-Saxon words, which is true and laser shot, hit the essence of it. You got to have the great love of what we can build and which we deserve. And you have to have tremendous hate for those who are destroying us. Love, hate. They work together. The hate gets you off your behind and makes you go. It's like a whip every day of your life. Whoa, whoa, Jesus. Oh, look at those girls walking down the street. They look like hobos. What the hell's wrong with you girls? Don't you know how you have been destroyed? You look like tramps. Worse. You look like you crawl out of a garbage can. What is wrong with you? Oh my God, look, you got tattoos on your body. You've pierced yourself. Wake up. You're living in a, you'll never be able to get rid of it. You've lost your soul. How old are you, girl? You're 28 years old, huh? You been married? No. Why? I don't want to get married. Oh, I see. Well, are you going to get married? Well, yeah, someday. Going to have kids? Well, I don't know. Maybe. I said, you know what? You're about 12 years away from being damaged goods. Let's be brutally honest. When a woman hits the age of 40, she loses her beauty quickly. And she's no longer attractive in the superficial sense of physical beauty. And her eggs are old. And the probability of producing defective offspring is higher and rising like an exponential perpendicular climb. And then it's all over. And what has she got to show for it? I said, woman, you have a wasted life at age 28. You are a victim of propaganda. You've lost your soul. You have no more contact with your kids. Or I meet a woman who's got kids, and she's got them out at a daycare center. And they're little things. They deserve her love and her affection. And she is calloused about it. She has no conscience about it. Why? Because the propaganda is so goddamn powerful, and it is so incessant, and it's coming from so many places, under you, above you, around you, inside of you, all the time. It's incessant. It's like a background hiss. That propaganda is so powerful, it can actually make a young mother turn her little baby over to a daycare center. And that is the end. That is the end of that relationship. It's over with. And she doesn't have a qualm at all. Not a qualm. I find that something that I almost cannot believe. Yet that's how callous they are today. We have homosexuality on the rise. Lesbianism is everywhere. We have miscegenation, interracial marriage, blacks with whites, Orientals with blacks. It's on purpose. Or do you think that this just naturally evolved? Don't you realize that you are victims of a staged, managed society, and we have lost our soul? And the white race is disappearing from the face of the earth. I mean it. And it took millions of years to evolve our genes. Our genes, which are the product of natural selection from Western Europe and Northern Europe, which is completely different from the vast 6,000 miles of flat stretch steppe that crosses Asia and Central Europe and Central Asia. Steppe country. There's no premium there in natural selection for morality. Have you ever thought of that before? I bet you haven't. Well, think about it. Natural selection. What's natural selection? You know it. If you know your Darwinian history, you know that the postulatory structure of Darwinism is as follows. Every form of life tends to procreate exponentially. Yet, whenever a species establishes itself in an environmental niche, the population does not increase exponentially. When Charles Darwin was sitting in his reading chair in 1828 and was reading an essay on population by Malthus, he found out that what keeps populations in check is war, pestilence, and famine. And a bright light went off in his head. He went, oh my God. Oh my goodness, now I see it. And it was one of the greatest discoveries in the history of mankind. He said, if all races tend to expand exponentially, and if all species once established have a stable, static population, then there has to be, it follows as the night to day, it's a completely valid deduction that there has to be a struggle in life. And Malthus opened my eyes to it. Death, famine, disease, war. And if that's so, then that can be stated as a deduced law of nature. And I can prove its necessity because it's derived from the higher postulates. Now the question is, what else can I derive to explain the origin of species and the descent of man? I'm looking for that. And he said, I need another law of nature to go with the deduction, the theorem here. And if I can, I think I got the explanation for it. Oh God, he was so divinely inspired in that moment, you can't believe it. Divinely inspired. Divinely inspired. I got a non-theological concept of that now. You're divinely inspired when you're in Newton and you hear the apple fall and you see the moon and you say, my God, could the force that's pulling those two things around the earth or down into it, basically the same thing, is it the same thing? And if so, what is it? And how can I explain that through my knowledge of geometry? And he comes up with the force of gravity is proportional to the product of the masses that are involved with the constant there, divided by the square of the distance it separates them. The universal law of gravitational attraction. That's so beautiful. So Darwin is experiencing this divine revelation when he says, within a species, characteristics of individuals vary from individual to individual. No exceptions. That's a law of nature. Now, if there is a struggle for existence, and if characteristics within a species vary from individual to individual, then whatever it is, he didn't know what was causing this, whatever it is that is causing these variations will act like a pressure head, and it will cause nature to select those characteristics which are best fitted for survival in whatever environment that species happens to be in. And over time, this constant pump, this constant drive to the creation of differentiations in characteristics will lead to the emergence of superior members within that species and ultimately to new species. And that follows as the night to day as well. Result, I'm able to completely derive the necessity of what Hitler said concerning mongrelization and the danger of miscegenation, and why it is that the Asiatic peoples, whose life was parasitical, they lived off the steppe, and when they ran out of grasslands for their crops, they killed and wiped out villages in hideous ways that is beyond your imagination. Why? They had no moral scruple. Why? There was no premium for morality or scruple or hesitation. None whatsoever. In fact, a man who had that in that environment over tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of years was a danger. He was a liability. Now you take, now think about this. This is all my original thought here, I think. You take the forested fastnesses of Europe. You take those crowded mountain ranges. The Asians were never able to conquer Europe because they ran into forests and mountains. But the people who lived there could not live parasitically. They had to have forethought. They had to have worry. They had to have a quest for major generalizations from which they could derive a better concept of reality with which they could invent an artificial village, a society to live in. Otherwise they die. And there was a high premium for moral cooperation as the division of labor would emerge. Hence, you get the genetic pool of the northwestern European peoples. And out of that comes all of the cosmology and technological derivatives that make it possible for the human species to survive in the numbers they do today. And what have we been taught, we white people? We have been taught that we should be ashamed of our race and that we should subsidize and feel sorry for and feel guilty about the plight of the North American Indian or the Negroes and so forth and so on. And just for your information, while I'm on the subject, because you're probably never going to hear me again, I'm going to tell you this, that the slave ships that brought the Jews from Africa to the Caribbean islands were the Negroes. What did I say? No, it was the Jews that brought them. They owned the slave ships. And the manifest of the ownership of the slave ships, which exists today in Baltimore, if you go and check it out, you should do that. If you're going to take a trip to the Eastern Seaboard, put that on your itinerary. Do it. And go and look. You'll see Goldstein, Finkelstein, all these Jews. About 60 to 80% of all the slave ships were owned and manufactured by the Jews, and the distilleries in Rhode Island, in a city called Providence, way back in the 1600s, was completely controlled by the Jews. And they bought the Negroes for 30 bucks, 20 to 30 bucks a head. They sold them in the Caribbean for $2,000 to $3,000. So what did they care if a whole bunch of them died on the way? That's called the Great Triangle. Molasses from the Caribbean to New England, where it's converted into rum. The rum is used to do all kinds of things. They made fortunes out of it, and then they sent it over as payment for the Negroes, the proceeds they got from that. And we were never taught any of this stuff in school. Instead, we allowed an alien race to enter into our national body, and everything that has brought us down can be traced back exclusively to that race. That's why they constantly are feeding us this crap about such things as Braveheart. Longshanks. Who said that he was sick? Was it you? Who said six? Longshanks. Pete? Yeah. You know how he was depicted in Braveheart? You remember, you see the movie? Who saw the movie? A little skinny, old, effete man. The opposite of what he was. I told my daughter, I says, so they're not telling the truth? The message is for that bastard brigand up there in Scotland, Wallace, who is a brigand and a rotter. So they're misrepresenting history on every front. Their depiction of young children in these camps is disgusting. They're not back in those ages. This is the typical little shits that run around today. These little kids that no girls want to have. I don't blame them. But they falsely generalize, of course. So what do you think of all this? Phew, man. The fires of building freedom are very hot. And unless you have this tremendous capacity for hate and love, you'll never be able to do a damn thing. You'll be demoralized, uneducated, and you will be a victim of the apathy of our times. That is something I can't stand. I told Galambos one time, he said, what's wrong with my market? I said, you haven't got any people with any literature in their bellies. These are not intellectuals. And then I told him about Lenin. Come back to that and then finish that story. When Lenin saw these recruits coming into his presence, the men who brought them in were all excited about him. And they said, well, what do you think? What do you think? God, what do you think? These guys are really they really got it, don't they? It's that great. And Lenin says, he says, get rid of them. Just like, get rid of them. And he said, why? Answer, they're not on furlough from death. You understand what I mean there? You're not on furlough from death. Let me help you understand that. Jesus told his disciples when he had just recruited them, James and John, the sons of Zebedee. You can read about this in the Gospel of John. You should read it. They said to him in a very conventional, even today, oh God, somebody in my family just died. I gotta go to the funeral. The hell with it. I'm not going to go to any of my relatives' funerals. Why? I have no proprietary interest in them. They're not interested in me. The hell with them. I'm not interested in my relatives. That's healthy, what I just said right there. Everybody else has this mistaken idea that they should be loyal to their relatives, even their own children. I'm not loyal to my children unless they behave. So what did Jesus, they said, may we have a leave of absence so we can go back and bury somebody in our family? You know what Jesus said? Anybody know? What? Yes. But first he said, Mary, he said, no, follow me. Let the dead bury the dead. That's the attitude you got to have here. If you don't have that attitude, if you're not capable of having that attitude, you're in the wrong place tonight. He also said, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his own soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? Think not that I have come to this earth to bring peace, but a sword. I shall set a son against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. He who loves mother or father more than me is unworthy of me. And who is me? How did Jesus refer to himself? He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one cometh to the Father except through me. Well, I'm going to tell you something right now. Here's my attitude. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And no one gets to freedom except through me. And I commend that you have the same attitude. You must have that radical, fervent zeal that's born of two great loves, two great emotions, love and hate. When Jesus was writing to the church at Philadelphia, you can read this in the 2nd chapter of the the letter of Revelation. He said, and I can just about quote this, he said, I know your works, that you are faithful, that you have not slacked in your belief, that you are patient. and that you have stood up for my name, and you have tested those who claim they're apostles and found them to be false. Now, you know something? I have been to a lot of different so-called Christian denominations, but I have yet to find one that could pass muster with what these people were. That's quite a crew of Christians there, boy. I'll tell you what, if I were Jesus, I would love those guys. They've kept his name. They've tested false apostles. They've never flagged. They're staying with him. They're loyal. They are long-suffering. And yet Jesus said something to them which I pass on to you. And here it is. But this one thing I have against you. You have lost your first love. Repent, or I will come to you soon and remove the lampstand from your midst. Those whom I love, I chasten. I claim that Galambos' market was titillated, entertained, and intellectually fulfilled, if you will, with the cosmology, the semantics, the philosophy, the technology, and all that. But they fell away from their first love. They lost it. Here's one of the great tests. Ask anybody who's taken the theory after all these years. Say, do you still have possession of your notes? You do? Oh, you took notes. Good for you. You still have possession of your notes? Yes, I do. Well, where are they? Where do you keep them? Oh, they're stored away in the basement. Oh, that explains everything, doesn't it? When the Jews came out of Egypt and they went into Sinai and deliberately were put there by God, who deceived them, which makes me not like God at all. He's the big Jew in the sky, and I detest him. Anyway, that aside, he gets them lost in Sinai to glorify himself, the scriptures say. We find that when they're there, he gives them the 10 commandments. That's just the first 10. There were 613 of the damn things. That's called the Torah, in case you're interested. And one of the last commandment, I think it's the last, or it's very close to it, he said something to this effect. And I command you to take into your hearts the things I have given to you this day. You must teach them to your children. You must speak of them when you rise in the morning, when you go about their way during the day, and when you retire at night. You must bind them as front locks on your foreheads and on the bands of your wrists, and you must paint them on your doorposts and on the gates of your house. In other words, you must never cease talking the theory here. You must never cease thinking about it. Because if you do, the law of logarithmic stimulation, the Weber-Fechner law, will completely erode that away, and you'll lose it. And there is nothing worse than somebody who once tasted of the heavenly gift, who saw the Messiah. Now you take the theology out of that, you can make a non-theological application to Galambos and to his theory. Do it. Those who have tasted of the heavenly gift, who have been an eyewitness in the presence of the Messiah himself, and who have received the promise and seen the world to come, who then apostatize, can never again be recovered. One night, on the phone to Galambos, I asked him, I said, Professor, do you ever think you'll ever be able to get Jerome Smith or Robert Thomas or Jerry Miller or Matt Lang back into the fold? And his answer was, of course not. Do you know why? It's a rhetorical question. You know, when Galambos asks that, you don't try to answer it. You go, why? Because he's going to tell you something great. And here's what he said that was very great. He said, the reason is this. Once they've seen it and they fall away, they never come back. You never get them back. And the reason is this. A man is never so firm as in his decision to sink, or so strong as in his weakness. And when people conjure delusions that justify them at the expense of those who are trying to teach them, that is a position that is so strong, I'm sorry, you can't get them back. That's what happened to Galambos' market when I put the test to them. And I challenge any of you here to think of circumstances that would transcend the importance and the urgency of the test I put the market to. Galambos' primary estate was about to be completely obliterated, wiped out, misrepresented, misapplied, no freedom in the prospects. And there was nothing I could do about it politically. Can you think of any circumstances more critical than that? You can't. That's why I said you need to put the pressure on these people on a non-litigious way until they cave in. Victoria over here called me on the phone, the only female to do it. And she said, well, where's the